Hi, I'm Sandon Jacobs, developer advocate at Confluent, with a look at what's new in Apache Kafka 4.3. Now, this release includes 25 KIPs, with features like preserving event headers and Kafka streams, new production controls for share groups, and a new way to isolate a broker or a disk to help with your maintenance workflows. There's also a focus on the future of the Kafka ecosystem, looking ahead to version 5.0 and beyond. So let's get into it. Let's start with a couple of features that enable Kafka Streams apps to fully utilize Kafka record headers. KIP 1271 makes event headers a first-class citizen in Kafka Streams state stores. Let's say you're using headers to store metadata like correlation IDs for distributed tracing or feature flags for downstream processing. After a stateful operation in Kafka Streams, those headers weren't stored with the key value and timestamp of the event. Now there are new state store interfaces for the processor API to persist these headers. KIP 1285 leverages those new state store types in the Kafka Streams DSL. You can use a new configuration to globally opt in for all of your state stores in your DSL topology or opt in for specific state stores as you see fit. This is supported in the topology test driver, meaning you can validate this in your unit test with both the processor API and the Kafka Streams DSL. I've done multiple presentations about KIP 932, aka Queues for Kafka, and I almost always get questions about configs at the share group level. Well, KIP 1240 adds a few production tuning knobs for more fine-grained control of share groups. Let's think of this as two tiers of configuration for share groups. First, there's a set of cluster-level guardrails that are managed by operators, and these values are set based on best practices and testing. And this is designed to make sure that we're mindful of the needs of other applications using the Kafka cluster. Then there's a set of controls for the share group itself, because not every use case is created equally. These configurations are set within those operator-managed limits that we just mentioned on the server side. Let's take a look at a few of these new configs. Let's start with delivery count. Now you can set an upper and lower bound for all share groups in the broker configuration. Then, on your specific share group, you can specify a delivery count that meets your needs, which will operate within those server-side bounds. You can also enable or disable the use of the acknowledgement type renew for your share group, provided you're using the explicit acknowledgement mode. You may recall from version 4.2 that renew is for your long-running task, and it gives developers a way to tell the broker that I need a little more time to process this specific message. Disabling this for your group means you can only use the accept, release, or reject acknowledgement type values on that record. Otherwise, you'll cause an invalid record state error for that message. These new configs in 4.3 should allow multiple share groups in the same cluster to operate with some independence and be tuned to their own needs. Okay, Kafka operators, this one's for you. KIP 1066 introduces a mechanism to isolate brokers and log directories, a concept borrowed from the Kubernetes world called cordoning. The goal here is to reduce the friction of cluster operations like scaling up or scaling down, disk removal, or even broker decommissioning. In Kafka, a cordon log directory can still serve existing replicas, but it can't receive any new partition replica assignments. If you cordon all of the log directories on a broker, that broker itself is effectively cordoned. This gives operators a first-class way to create a zone of no new work here for disk and brokers without interrupting Kafka clients. Let's pivot back to Kafka Streams, where there are a number of other notable additions in this release. Until now, offsets have been tracked separately from state. You've got checkpoint files here and some state store implementation over there, with no way to atomically update the two of them. KIP 1035 provides a way forward where the state store can also manage these changelog offsets. This means persistent state stores own their committed changelog offsets for the sake of correctness, better RocksDB behavior, and to enable future transactional state store semantics. KIP 1259 introduces a new config option to clean up old local state files and directories. Now, this is an opt-in, so you'll need to specify the value to take advantage of this cleanup feature. Prior to this release, the processing exception handler applied only to regular streams tasks, meaning an issue with a global K-table could potentially crash your Kafka Streams application. New configuration in KIP 1270 changes that by using the processing exception handler in global K-table task. Once you start using this config, global table processing should behave more like the rest of Kafka streams. And this gives users a more controlled path to handle exceptions instead of just treating them as unhandled failures. This will be enabled by default in Kafka 5.0. This release also includes a number of improvements, enhancements, and fixes around JMX metrics for storage, OAuth client assertion, coordinator buffer caps to prevent out-of-memory errors, craft fetch configs, mirror maker metric standardization, and Kafka Connect discoverability for connectors and SMTs. The Apache Kafka community always has one eye on the future of the platform. This means that preparations are well underway for version 5.0 and beyond. Here are a few forward-looking features of the 4.3 release. Let's start with rebalancing. In recent releases, KIP 848 introduced a much more efficient and less disruptive consumer rebalance mechanism. KIP 1071 brought this to Kafka streams. As of Kafka 5.0, the consumer rebalance mechanism introduced in KIP 848 will become the default. To prepare for this, those classic level configs are going to be deprecated in the 5.0 release. Now, you can still use those classic configs if you'd like. You have to do so explicitly when you configure your consumer, but you're likely going to see some pretty opinionated suggestions in the logs to nudge you on into the future. In Kafka 6.0, that classic rebalancing mechanism will be removed entirely. So now is the time to migrate and start testing with this new protocol. The Scala wrapper for the Kafka Streams DSL is deprecated and is slated to be removed in Kafka 5.0. You should migrate to the Java DSL ASAP. With Crafts mode, the controller creates topics, and this means the defaults for partition counts and replication factor and all of those other topic level configurations belong on the controller. The goal here is to standardize how topic settings are applied across the cluster. As of Kafka 5.0, these broker-side topic level settings will be ignored in favor of the values that are coming from the controller's configuration. And that's Apache Kafka version 4.3. Check the description for links to our release blog, the release notes, and other useful resources. And make sure you subscribe to the Confluent developer channel. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment or question. Thanks for watching.